So we're doing things a little differently tonight. We're not having a formal presentation, but we're going to have a discussion. And we have, we're very excited and thrilled. We're very excited and thrilled. We have 3 folks, and Dr. Bateman has joined us, so that's quite a surprise, and we're thrilled for that. So I'm not going to introduce Dr. Bateman. I think we all know Dr. Bateman very well and how wonderful she is. But I'd like to introduce Dr. Suzanne Vernon. She is the Bateman Horne Research Liaison, and we're so happy that she's here today. Suzanne earned her undergraduate degree in microbiology at Colorado State University. Following that, she received her doctorate degree in virology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She has co-authored 100 scientific papers and has dedicated the last 20 years of her research career to ME/CFS. At the Bateman Horne Center, Suzanne is building a research program focused on identifying biomarkers, developing diagnostic tests, and uncovering evidence-based treatments. And on my far left, we have Linda Avey, and we're so happy that Linda has joined us tonight as well. She received her degree in biology from Augustine College, and Linda has worked for companies providing biomolecular research tools to academic, pharma, and biotech research organizations. And in 2006, Linda co-founded 23andMe, accelerating genetics research through crowdsourcing and consumer data sharing. Currently, she is the co-founder and CEO of Precisely. So tonight, Suzanne and Linda will share with us what they've been working on using Precisely and Oura Ring for research as they have a discussion with Dr. Bateman. Please welcome Dr. Bateman, Dr. Vernon, and Linda Avey.
Thank you.
So I thought I was going to get off easy tonight and sit in the audience, but not so. So it's really a privilege to sit here with these 2 great innovators, an innovator in science and an innovator in technology and science, and the way they've worked together. So we're bringing the clinical and the science and the innovation and technology together to try to really move this field forward more quickly. So I'm going to start by asking, get them going, but I want each one of them to tell us a little bit about what drew them into this field and also what is their vision.
Wow. You want me to start?
Go for it.
Well, I would like to just kind of start back 2 years ago with this idea that originated mostly from once I met Linda. So start 2 years, but then Linda will probably go back to when we met 6 or 7 years ago. And it was the idea to try to use platforms and devices to generate objective data about the symptoms of ME/CFS so that we could really take the guesswork out of it. And it was a proposal that I brought to you and the Bateman Horne Center to see how we could engage our patients as partners in research to really help us get to the bottom of ME/CFS. And so a lot of that proposal that I came to you with was inspired from my meeting Linda back in 2010, I think, at the Partnering for Cures meeting in New York City. It's a meeting that's hosted, organized by Faster Cures, the Milken Institute. And Kim McCleary and I were there at Partnering for Cures, and someone said, "You've got to meet Linda Avey." Linda Avey wants to meet you, and Linda will tell a little bit about that story. And I was like, Linda Avey? Really? I was so excited to meet you. And
Likewise.
And when we met, I mean, there was such synergy in our vision of engaging patients as partners in research, helping us form the research and and the ways to do that. So that's how I got here to this point in this project, which we'll talk about in a little bit in more depth. And I don't know, there's just been this incredible convergence of, attention to ME/CFS by the Institutes of Medicine, and our growth here at the Bateman Horne Center, and an incredible research program, technology, how it's advanced, and the realization of how important it is to put this type of technology into the hands of the patients with the most experience, of the people with the most experience with the disease, and now in order to help inform and make progress. So I couldn't be more excited about what we're about to talk about and what's in store because of what we've been able to accomplish over the past 2 years.
Yeah, well, I will go a little bit more into meeting you because that was a very powerful moment for me and a validation of this new company idea. But the story really goes back to even before 23andMe, and I was working at a company that was doing genetics research, and a lot of my previous history was firmly and deeply in genetics. And I think there was a real flaw in the design of studies back in the day. There was sort of this assumption that you could simply just get a saliva sample or a DNA sample from a patient, put it in a DNA sequencer, and out would pop the answer. And if the answer didn't pop out, it was because we didn't have enough DNA. So we would go get more and more samples, but we still weren't finding the answers we sought. And what really opened my eyes, I think, was a project that we were looking to do in autism, which is another very complex condition. And I went to a fundraiser where there were all these families and their kids running around or not. And you look at two kids with autism and they can look completely different. I saw kids in wheelchairs and I saw kids running circles around their parents. And I knew this is ridiculous. This is not a clean phenotype or not a clean diagnosis by any stretch of the imagination. And so that's kind of what moved my head from such a genetics focus to how do we gather more information from the patients, because they are the ones who can tell us how they're doing, how they're responding to drugs, what symptoms they have every day, not through surveys, even through tracking, so that we can actually get the direct information from the patient community. And that was what really triggered the idea for the new company now that we are working on and that we're working together to start this project. And the notion is that if we could gather all of our personal data together in one place and own it and control it as individuals, but then be able to share it out with researchers, with clinicians, and kind of be the bridge between the patients and the research community. So that's what we've chosen to focus on. And so we were just getting the company launched. I met my two co-founders who are based in New York. I'm in California. And they were on a very similar mission. And as it turns out, our co-founder ended up being diagnosed with ME/CFS. So she was very driven to build this platform for her own purposes. And that was probably the first time that I really heard a lot about ME/CFS, because I was kind of there while she was going through this diagnostic odyssey and finally gets this diagnosis, which to her didn't really mean all that much. She still felt like she was sort of on first base and still had a lot of work to do. So when I met Suzanne at Partnering for Cures, it's like the light bulbs just went on. It was so clear that we were probably on the right track to get validation back from several people from the ME/CFS community. But Suzanne, we just bonded immediately. And I'm so happy to be sitting here now because we are, I think, on to something big. And I think we're going to really move the needle, hopefully, in the research of this condition.
I'm just going to throw in that what I know as a clinician, I know from listening to patients for long hours and focusing on each symptom and having them come back and report to me what's happened since they started the medicine or stopped their medicine. And it's only over many, many years and hundreds of people that I've been able to pull together the clinical intuition. So I've started to feel desperate to be able to get that same information and make it quicker and make it thousands times more people, because what we all discover is one person one-on-one is so slow. And even if I have this vast knowledge the way that a patient does, it's still difficult for me to communicate it to scientists and to other physicians without data. So being able to reach out and give people tools and be able to empower people to deliver this information is very, very important. Just like having them take the NASA Lean test instructions to their doctor and be able to go through that, or record their own sleep or record their steps and be able to take that in. So tell us more about your projects and specifics.
I just want to reflect back on my first encounter with ME/CFS, and it was very similar to yours with autism. And it was back in the mid to late 90s at my first IACFS meeting, and I think it was in San Francisco. And I knew nothing about ME/CFS, except that I was bound and determined to discover, pathogens that were associated or maybe causing it, because that's what I had heard. And when I got to the meeting, it was my first meeting where there was actually patients involved, which I thought was amazing, along with scientists and clinicians. And then it was just really meeting the patients and listening to their stories and really being fascinated by the various journeys that individuals have been on, and answers or just conversations about what caused it and what their daily experiences are. And I saw the same thing. It was different for every individual, and it really made me reflect on how in kind of conventional science, how we designed studies to try to get to the bottom of diseases. And it's with kind of standard questionnaires that are maybe designed by experts, but maybe not necessarily reflective of individuals' experiences, or maybe just scratches the surface. And yeah, so it was just really enlightening to me, and I think that first experience kind of codified in me the need to understand what's going on and engage individual patients in the process of research.
And then what's so fascinating is there's been this convergence now with the ability for patients to have a wearable and to be able to put technology in their environment and on their bodies, so that we can start to collect data like we've never done before. And so that was really timed with the launch of our platform, that we saw this ability, and we've met and worked with some of these companies that are providing this amazing technology. So being able to pull that in with things that people are tracking, medications they're taking, their genetic information, their microbiome data, it's really the big data that we're looking for, that we seek, that I think will shed so much light on what's going on and may identify the subtypes that we think might be lurking under the surface of this ME/CFS label. And maybe we'll start to see the subtypes forming, so that it isn't just all N of one. Maybe there will be these groups that we can then start to dive into a little bit deeper and look at genetics once we have formed these subtypes, which I think will be far more informative than what we've done to date, which has been just throw it in the sequencer and hope something comes out.
Right. So you keep mentioning this platform. Can you give us a little bit more information about the platform?
Yeah, so what we decided to do is of course, we didn't set out to necessarily be just focused on a particular disease area. So we wanted to make sure our platform was designed in a way that it was very flexible, that you could track pretty much anything you wanted. And so we designed a very tag-based strategy and architecture, so that anyone can come and create their profile on our platform. It's currently called We Are Curious. So we have an iOS and an app on Android. So you can download the apps on your phone, and you can be off to the races tracking right then and there. You just open up the app, and there's a little track screen. You create your tag, and maybe it's knee pain, or what are some of the more prominent symptoms of ME/CFS. You could just create those tags, right? And then whenever you feel the need to track that, you can just go in and everything.
So a tag is a symptom?
It's a symptom or it's a treatment. So if you let's say you start a new sleep aid, you want to document, when did I start this new sleeping pill? You can put that in and just say, on this date, it's kind of like a diary. So you would say, starting on this date, I started this medication. And then if you're wearing this particular wearable that a bunch of us in the room have on, it tracks your sleep. And so we have a partnership with this company that we can pull summary data from the Ring every day into your Curious profile. And then you can layer on all of this additional information. So you could look and say, okay, I'm going to graph the day I started this sleep med, and then I'm going to see how it affected my sleep. Did I get more sleep? Did I get more deep sleep? And all the ways that this breaks down how you've slept, and your steps and all of your activity data that it also collects. So it's a way to merge that all together. And then let's say you've got the MTHFR mutation, I forget the 677C, is it C677T? I believe is one of the...
I'm good to remember the first half.
Yeah. But I think a lot of patients now are becoming informed about this kind of information, partly through 23andMe data, and now that can also become a tag in your profile, that if you've got that specific mutation that might be implicated in part of your disease condition, that all gets merged together. And so now it kind of puts tags on you as a person that are associated with your condition in some way. And so you can use our platform for just N-of-1 tracking. You can decide, I'm just going to do this on my own privately, and I want to look at my own data. Then the other thing that we have is the ability to build tracking protocols. So both of you as scientists and physicians in this area could design tracking protocols for patients to follow. So then that becomes more of a group exercise, that a bunch of people can come in and say, we're all going to track these 5 symptoms and maybe some medication that we're starting, and it gives a way to...
an exercise program.
Exactly.
Or the lean test. I mean, it's going to be phenomenal what we can do with this platform. I'd just like to interject a little bit. That's what was so attractive about the We Are Curious platform, is when Linda and I met, I had been kind of assessing the landscape of tracking platforms. And many of them were very fixed. They were like kind of electronic, standardized paper questionnaires. Rate your pain, rate your...
At this moment in time,
yeah,
right?
So it was kind of fixed. It didn't really give you the opportunity to track your actual experiences. And We Are Curious was, in a way, this kind of blank, free-form slate that you could personalize with information, tags, and look what happens over time, and incorporate various wearable device data. And it just, to me, was, wow, the things that could be revealed from that type of personalized tracking was very, very powerful. And I remember one of your presentations at Partnering for Cures, when you talked about a cardiac monitor or something like that, and one person using We Are Curious was able to associate something in the house. I think it was...
Actually, that was in our autism project, yeah. So they were actually looking at their environment data. So there's a family where they have a classroom at home. And I just suggested, why don't you get one of these things called the NetAtmo, and it measures CO2,
yes,
temperature, humidity. I think they do pollen count. It's a really cool device. You used to be able to buy it at the Apple Store. And they bought that and they put it into the classroom, and the first thing they noticed is that this woman, she's 22 now, pretty highly affected with autism, that she did much better when the temperature was lower in the classroom. So I think they've lowered it down to like 62 degrees or something. So all the teachers have sweaters on. But the other thing they noticed, though, is that in the summertime when they had to have the air conditioning on, they would close all the windows in the classroom to keep it cooler. but then the CO2 levels would start going up. Well, what happened is the CO2, when it went over 1,000 parts per million in the classroom, they started noticing seizures. So they didn't know. It would have been something they would have never correlated before.
So they were tracking the seizures on Curious, and the various device data was synced with Curious, and so these patterns began to emerge.
Yeah, and it even emerged before they saw it on our platform, because they heard the alarm going off, and she's starting to have a seizure. So they don't know if it's causal, but it's just something they noticed that they're going to start paying more attention to.
And imagine, while it's helpful in one case, imagine if you had that in 1,000 people.
Or 10,000.
Or 10,000.
Or 100,000.
And if, 10% had the same association over and over and over, you might not notice it in a case of one.
Right.
But it might pop right up and make more sense when you have a lot of people uploading their data and allowing it to be used in research, which would be a choice they had.
Exactly.
With their data.
They could opt in to share that data. Yeah. So things like migraines, maybe they're clustering because of barometric pressure changes somewhere. Maybe it has nothing to do with the condition. There's just so many things so many questions we can ask. We just need to start collecting the data.
Right. Right. And watching these patterns emerge.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that was, again, one of the reasons why. Maybe mention a little bit about the partnership with Aura.
Yeah. So I actually met the company we share an investor in Finland. And so I was, so with our platform, when we were in stealth mode on our website, all you could do is post a question. And we got some pretty crazy questions because we had no guidance on there. It's just like, post a question. What are you curious about? And time after time, I would just keep a log of all the questions, and I would pull out the tags in them. And sleep was the #1 topic that people were asking about. Just amazingly, it's just a topic people are having a lot of problems with, and it affects normal people with illnesses, and across the board. And so we decided, well, that's a great topic for us to focus on. And so I started trying all of the sleep trackers on the market, whether they were on the mattress, on the bedstand, on the body, and was really striking out. I wasn't really that impressed with the data we were collecting. And so I was telling my investor about this. I'm like, God, this is really frustrating. There's so many sleep trackers on the market, but they're all kind of lame. And he finally was able to tell me about Aura. And we connected a couple years ago now. And we've formed this partnership, which has been wonderful, and the data that are coming off the Ring are great now, and I think it's only going to get better. As they get more data, they can hone their algorithms. And the thing I really like about their team, so several of their scientists came from Polar, the chest strap company, and they got really excited about collecting that type of data, heart rate data especially, but they knew people wouldn't wear a chest strap 24/7, so they decided to come up with a better design, a better form factor. They kind of looked all over the human body to say, okay, where would somebody wear something 24/7? And I think they tried an earlobe piece at one point, but when you roll over in bed, that can mess up the data, and they finally settled on the finger and a ring. And so this is their first design. They've got a lot of other things in the works, but the quality of the data, I think, is really what is most important and most exciting about the product.
And the fact that Aura shares, We Are Curious and Aura share an API. So the data that is picked up from the Aura Ring and collected on the Aura app, I don't know if the camera can see that, but my Ring, for example, syncs with the app, and it creates this nice little summary about the various parameters that it measures: sleep, activity, and a readiness index, which kind of gives you information about, well, you slept like this, and the day before you had this much activity, so now this is what the next day is going to look like. This summary information is then synced onto the We Are Curious profile.
Your profile.
Your profile. So my profile. So I have been able to map my sleep data, my Aura data, with things that I now know disrupt or improve my sleep.
Because you've been entering them on the platform, and then they can be compared.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing, that's an important point. The wonderful thing is syncing the Ring data to my We Are Curious, which is also on my phone, is seamless, right?
It's a one-time handshake that you make, right? So you, as the owner of the ring, and then with a Curious profile, you make that one-time connection. So from then on, there's just this automatic upload of the data from the ring, the summary data, into your Curious profile. So now you see that just popping in on a daily basis. And we don't want to replicate what they do in their app, which is really cool. I think they display the information in a really informative way.
Yep.
But then we'll pull that in and now merge that with other things you're tracking,
Right.
Whether it's caffeine consumption or, the sky's the limit. You can really track anything you want that you think might be affecting your sleep or that might be giving you headaches. There's just any number of things that you can track because you can create these tags. So it's that merging and combining the data from the wearables. So the other company that we've partnered with is Withings or Withings. They make a blood pressure cuff for consumers. They have their own wearables, like the wrist-based wearables. What I have of theirs is the blood pressure cuff. So I can just take my bathroom scale. So I have their bathroom scale, which links to their cloud. And we've done a sync with them as well. So if you link your Withings account, any of their wearables or things that you use will also do this automatic upload into our profile. So once that's set up, then you're kind of off to the races.
Right. So I love the kind of the personalized aspect of it. Me using my ring and my We Are Curious. I was able to see that, drinking wine or eating late at night really disrupts my sleep, affects some of the various stages of my sleep, which are measured by the Oura Ring. Like 6 weeks ago, I tore my meniscus, so I had pretty bad pain, and the pain at night was just incredible, and to see the impact on my sleep, the various stages of sleep and the sleep quality was really amazing. So then I can add tags that take such a dose of ibuprofen each night and see the effect that has on my sleep quality. It was very illuminating.
And empowering.
And empowering, yeah. I mean, I had control, and it just felt amazing. So from a personalized perspective, and then the ability to use the feature of We Are Curious, which is called the Trackathon, where we can, a whole bunch of people, whether it be a clinician, a scientist, creates a Trackathon, which is really a kind of a research project. Lets everybody now see what happens when we drink wine, or we take a certain medication, or we just track our sleep together. So that kind of protocol can happen on We Are Curious. And that's what we did with the Oura Ring and We Are Curious.
So maybe we should talk about the pilot a bit.
Yeah, a little
I
pilot
think people
study.
would like to hear about that.
So when the Trackathon capability was enabled on We Are Curious, we got this idea of,
And when the ring was available.
and when the ring was available, which was actually just last year, right? It was launched. We got the idea of participating in the Kickstarter for Oura Ring to get the rings at a discounted price.
Which was that we did the Kickstarter campaign 2 years ago this summer, I
Was
think.
it already 2 years ago?
Yeah, because it took a while. They weren't. Kickstarter products aren't always ready to ship.
That's right. That's
so
right.
we had a little of lag time to get the rings into the hands of the people.
That's right. That's right. So I think that it closed down in November, and then by the time the rings got delivered to everybody, it was last year.
Yeah,
Sometime.
exactly.
And then we did a pilot study. And our idea was to do a pilot study using the ring and with We Are Curious and patients. Because these devices are kind of designed for fitness and wellness. And the algorithms that run these devices are usually calibrated on healthy people. And so it was like, well, how will they work in a chronically ill patient population which has unrefreshing sleep, unrestorative sleep? What's the data going to look like coming out of it? So we wanted to really assess, can patients wear, a device like this? Is it comfortable? How is it tolerated? What does the data look like? You know, if we test it, can we then use it in a much larger population? So start small, beta test it, and get an idea of whether or not it's a good idea to go big. And we hired a community coordinator, community project coordinator. Carrie Allshouse was our community project coordinator, which, now was actually one of the most important things, one of the most important people to have in a project like this. Because while wearing a device and syncing it with a phone is relatively, easy to do, it was so important to have Carrie help develop the protocol so that it was reflective of a patient's experience, because Carrie does have ME/CFS. And I think just help along the way. She
All the communication together.
Yeah.
Really important.
And I mean, it was amazing because Carrie communicated with our 20 beta testers every day. She created videos about, how to use the ring, how to sync the ring, how to create the tags, how to join the Trackathon on We Are Curious. And, it wasn't, even though the ring is easy, patients have challenges. Actually, I had challenges even with something like the charger, right? So this
And
is
technology has challenges.
Technology has
Yes, it does.
Maybe
But,
more challenges.
I mean, something as simple as fitting the ring on here, and this lights up when it's actually charging. It's really cool. It pulses like this.
Which
But-
is a feature they added when they realized that people were putting it on backwards, and so something that can seem so simple.
Right.
And that's why these videos that Carrie did were so incredibly helpful, because there's nothing like seeing somebody do something, right? So I think the effort she put into that was so worth it,
Right.
and so helpful.
So we had a group of 20 people, 20 patients who each got a ring and then wore it. I think we got our first rings on people in June, right? June or July of
Last summer, yep.
last summer. And the ring works it's a learning device. So it learns about you. So it's really important that the ring be worn for a period of time before you start using it to actually collect the data and analyze the data. And so many of the patients were wearing it and getting used to it and figuring out how to sync, and listening to Carrie's videos, watching Carrie's videos, and just corresponding back and forth before we launched the study, which was a 7-day study. Now, we went for 7 days rather than 2 weeks, which is recommended by ORA now to gather kind of 2 weeks of data. We went with 7 because people had been wearing the ring for several months beforehand. And we started collection of the data like on October 1st, and we went till October 7th. And we had, I think, a really good outcome from the study, in that most people, I think 18 of the 20, were able to generate good data over that period of time. We had one person drop out because they couldn't tolerate the ring. It didn't feel good on their hand. And then another person's ring just wasn't able to sync. So we weren't able to gather the data. So what's that as far as kind of a dropout? 10%?
10%.
10%, which is not bad. So that was one good aspect, learning experience from the pilot study. The other was that, the form factor was tolerated by most of the people. Most of the people liked it. Some didn't necessarily like it because it is big and kind of funky looking.
But do you get a lot of compliments on it
I
too?
get a lot of compliments.
I do
on
too.
my ring.
People
Yeah,
think,
I did. I wore mine for about 3
yeah,
months.
people think it is truly just jewelry, and then when they find out what it does, they're like, wow, that's incredible.
Everybody's like, what's that made of? That is so cool. And I said, well, it is a ceramic zirconium. So the ring itself it's water resistant. It can go down to 50 meters underwater. It's pretty amazing, durable device. And I don't know if the people out there in Viewerland can see it, but it has a little computer in there, and then it has sensors. So it's really
Get up to the camera.
it's really a remarkable.
Get that close. Do you want to bring it close really fast?
It's really quite a remarkable device.
And the thing I'm excited about is, based on the data that we gathered during the pilot, and in talking to the science team at Aura, they're very interested in working with us. So we have the potential. It's not in stone yet, but we're looking at developing specific algorithms for the ME/CFS community, where the ring would be programmed differently at the factory. So we would set up different algorithms. There would be a different way that they collect the data, and also how it's displayed in the app, because the app, as Suzanne was saying, it is more geared toward people who are active and who are well. It's trying to get you to be more active, and it's telling you your step count every day, and that could be pretty annoying, I think, for our patients. And so to kind of refactor that in a way that's more designed around, maybe you're walking too much, maybe you want to step it back a bit, that kind of information, especially based on this recovery score.
Right.
So if we can have them tailor the algorithms, also pick up naps. Right now, that's the one downside, is that the ring does not, I shouldn't say that. The ring collects the data. The app just doesn't display if you've been asleep in the afternoon, other than your night sleep. So I think there's huge opportunity for us to work with them and train their algorithms so that they can provide something that's going to be far more meaningful.
Right, which was one of the reasons we did the pilot study. Do the algorithms work with ME/CFS? For the most part, they do, but they just need slight adjustment. And the messages need to be adjusted too. And the nice thing was, again, Oro is a new company, and they had no experience with working with a chronically ill population. And so, when the feedback came back to Aura from the study about the messages that you get. No, I can't get up and, run 5 miles today versus, the 2 miles I did yesterday. They're open to that. And they are very excited about trying to do the adjustments in order to be able to optimize the performance of the ring in a much larger study population. So that was also, I think, to me, one of the most exciting outcomes of it was to have Aura see the potential of a device like this for research in the ME/CFS population. And they're very excited about that, too. So, yeah.
Maybe we need a blog post from some of those beta testers about their experience and what they learned.
Oh, that's a great idea. Actually, we asked for that, and we did get feedback from a couple of people, and I'm sure they would probably love that to be turned into a blog post. It'd be great. And I think the other important thing is after the study was over, we did present some of the data, the crunch data, at the IACFS meeting in Miami in October. But we also gave the opportunity for people to return their rings. And you don't like it, you don't like the way it looks, or you don't like wearing it, send it on back. But only one person returned the ring because they didn't wear it because they didn't like the form factor, but they loved the data that it produced. And everyone, or most of the people that we're still in contact with, are still wearing the ring and learning from it. Again, like I learned about what disrupts my sleep, And really, the only reason I learned about what it was because of combining Aura, the Ring, with my We Are Curious account, and being able to see these patterns that emerge from the meds, from the pain, from the wine, from the other things that, again, might disrupt my sleep from my activity, etc.
My craziest learning, and I don't know if there's anything to it, but there was an event we went to, and they were serving margaritas, and my husband and I both had our rings, and we had a margarita that night, and it's not something we typically drink. We both got way more deep sleep that night than we normally do. So we thought, wow, that's interesting. So you never know what you're going to find out.
So speaking of, the stages of sleep, the state that the Ring measures, and whether or not it's comparable to the gold standard, which is formal polysomnography. The way that Aura measures sleep is through a combination of factors, including motion detection, pulse form, and heart rate, and
HRV,
and heart rate variability. So it combines all of those things to be able to detect the stages of sleep. And there was just a paper that was just published last month, right?
I believe so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That has actually, this group has compared a number of devices, like Linda said, to polysomnography, and none of them have really panned out. And the correlation of the Aura Ring detection of stages is actually quite good to the gold standard, again, formal polysomnography.
In normal people.
In healthy people, yeah, and young, and I think they kind of spanned an age range from adolescents to elderly in healthy people. So
Let me just put that in some clinical perspective. If you want to know about your sleep now, you go to a doctor and resist, but the doctor will talk you into going and getting overnight polysomnography in a lab. Mm-hmm. You're feeling a little bit uncomfortable. It's a strange room. It's hard to find your normal sleep pattern. They can learn something from your sleep, but they can't learn about sleep artifact, because that means, the disturbances of sleep are sort of part and parcel of your sleep study. So they tend to just ignore them and look for primary sleep disorders when you are asleep. So if you have obstruction or central sleep apnea, your oxygen gets low, we kind of have to ignore a lot that we just chalk up to being in the sleep lab. When you're done, you have one night of partial sleep, and then you end up paying a couple of $1,000 through the insurance, and I don't know, people have different copays, but imagine then you're going to be making decisions for several years about your sleep based on one night in the sleep lab. For a fraction of the price of a sleep study, you can get a ring that monitors your sleep every night. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? What it does is shows you trends and helps you relate what's going on in the day to what happens at night, and it completely empowers you to observe and make changes. And I think one of the things we have to remember is we have a revolution in the way medicine is practiced right now. The old way was the doctor told you what to do and said, trust me, and sometimes you didn't even know about the results. They would just say, this is abnormal, go do this. And I've had patients who measure but don't ever think to bring me the measurements because they don't realize that, that's important information for a doctor, but it just shows we've been trained sort of not to bring things up, not to bring things into the doctor, not to lengthen the visit. So this is revolutionary, right, for you to be able to gather your own information and compile it and look for trends. And then we should start sharing it with doctors, with researchers, so that we can move past this block of not being able to collect enough information.
Exactly.
That's such an important point. if we think about the sleep literature for ME/CFS or the sleep findings, we know that unrefreshing or non-restorative sleep is a symptom for most ME/CFS patients. But if you go into the literature and look at the formal polysomnography studies, you're hard-pressed, the research is hard-pressed to find anything that's revealing of why that is. And our pilot study was small and we didn't have any controls, but it was interesting to see how some of the patients had zero deep sleep. And some of the patients had incredibly fragmented, multiple awakenings during the night sleep, and some had great sleep. So to be able to now put a device like this and collect data 24/7 over long periods of time from hundreds, thousands of patients, again, just think, and healthy people, just think of what's going to emerge from that. And again, correlated not only with your kind of self-report experience, but be able to track it along with diet, other things that you do on a platform like We Are Curious. And these associations, I think, are going to be revealed. So it is really revolutionary. And, who would have thunk, for a couple $100 for a ring versus how much is a polysomnography?
Probably several thousand by the time you're done.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible value for data that couldn't possibly be collected any other way.
Right. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think these technologies are going to just get better too, and I think we're going to see more and more coming to the fray that are going to be doing things so automated. There are sensors to put in clothing that I think are going to be really interesting, and following that field has been very exciting over the last few years to see what the potential is. We have, in the autism community, we have difficulty with form factor, like the kids will not wear a ring like this. So we have to figure out other form factors that might work. But the interesting corollaries between autism and ME/CFS are kind of surprising. That's something I didn't anticipate at all. So it's been very opportunistic that we're working in both spaces together because we have a foot in both camps. We're seeing these correlations or what look like similarities. And so that's the other part about this that we're very excited. And then we can continue to roll out to more and more disease communities as we go. And but we just see everybody as people. And they have lives and they have other issues beyond just their diagnosis. And there might be other things that they're interested in tracking. So I think that flexibility to be centered around the individual and let them kind of pose their own questions as well as participate in the group things hopefully will be informative at that individual level.
What do you hope to be able to get out of research like this, where patients are engaged as partners in research, taking these measurements? Where do you think it can get us with ME/CFS?
I think as a primary care clinician, and also because of my role on the Institute of Medicine committee that reviewed the evidence base and tried to use research data to show what the most common presenting symptoms are and the most enduring symptoms. My need to communicate this illness with physicians I just feel this urgency. We all know this illness is horrible and that it affects all of these systems. How can we not measure those symptoms? So when Suzanne and I got together, between us, I think as a physician, it's very clear to me how to begin to measure all the major symptoms in the clinical diagnostic criteria. Function and fatigability and post-exertional malaise, sleep and pain, you think orthostatic intolerance. So our drive has been to say, look, these are measurable. We just have to be creative. We have to come outside of our paradigm. And we've got to find ways to communicate and find ways to measure these things so every doctor can, kind of know how to make this diagnosis. The idea that all the tests are negative is a silly one. What it means is all the tests we used to use don't tell us anything. So we
Exactly.
need to figure out what tests or what measurements or what kind of communication will tell us something, and we need to start using it right away. And the people who know the most are people who are affected by the illness. So harnessing that and really putting it to work in large numbers and using technology is imperative. I firmly believe that our healthcare crisis could be solved by kind of completely changing how we do things and using technology to get a lot more information for a lot less money, and empowering individuals and just kind of changing the way we think, because the old way hasn't worked very well, and it hasn't worked at all for people with ME/CFS. So we just need to be creative and do it a new way.
Yep.
Couldn't agree more.
Hallelujah.
Yep.
All right. Do we have any questions? Do you want to, there's some online and there's also some here in the room, so.
So does the R ring, is it similar to the Fitbit, or does it work better? Does it work better than the Fitbit, or how are they the same or different?
So it's unique in that, so the Fitbit is based on an accelerometer, and what the Oura Ring has, it has an accelerometer, and it also has these sensors in it, these LED sensors that measure pulse and heart rate variability. And then it combines all of those measures into in an algorithm that then gives you the stages of sleep. What a Fitbit does, or some of the other wearable devices, is detect motion. So, wake, sleep. So kind of an up-down motion,
And also how much you move.
and how much you move, right. So,
They all have some value.
Yes.
It's better to monitor than not monitor.
Yes.
Right.
But what we're looking for is the highest quality information we can get.
right.
And just keep moving toward that.
Our gold standard is for sleep anyway, is polysomnography, where you're hooked up to all of these devices and, it measures all this stuff. And
Yet
that's
even-
what we have
yeah.
to compare to.
Yet even polysomnography, I found out that you go in for the night, you generate all this data, and then an analyst has to look at it, and they have to go through it and kind of make their own determinations as human beings. And apparently, two people looking at that data can vary by 80%.
Wow.
So even our gold standard is not necessarily...
And a lot of it's read by the machine anyway.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
there's a report generated, and then someone oversees it and makes some decisions about it.
Right.
But, in order to get the gold standard on polysomnography, you would probably need to do it every night for 3 or 4 nights. And by the 3rd or 4th night, you would start to relax, and you wouldn't be bothered by the noises, and you'd approximate your normal sleep a little bit better.
Right.
But still, it's very important science, but we don't have to rely on that when we have lots of other devices to fill in the gaps in between.
Right.
Right.
And getting a lot more people for a lot less money, more affordable, generate a lot more data.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my question, is that how do I get my hands on those? Seriously? And do they come bling?
Oh,
there. Yeah, so the question was, how do I get my hands on one of those rings?
Good question.
And you can just put Oura Ring into Google and find it's O-U-R-A. O-U-R-A. And you need to be able to have a laptop or you can do it on the computer. Do you have to have a smartphone?
you do.
Need a smartphone.
For the app, yeah. Either Android or iPhone.
And they're fun.
How much?
$299 is the cost of a ring now. Can I talk about our NIH application?
I don't know. You know those rules better than me.
Bateman Horn is co-investigator on one of the applications that just went in to the NIH for the Clinical Research Center funding opportunity, and we proposed in there to, use the ring on the patients and healthy controls that we will be following if we get the award over a 5-year period. And
Match it up with their blood tests and
Match it
their
up with their
lean
blood
tests and their everything.
and that will be a partnership with Aura. And so, hopefully we'll get a little bit of a deal on the rings.
Right. We'll work them.
Right.
I wore the ring in the pilot study, and what I noticed is it gave me a lot of information if I was willing to be responsible with the information I was getting. I'll give you an example. I could see that if I could get myself to bed before midnight, I would have better sleep. So then it put it back on my plate to do something about that behavior, and it's very difficult because my natural rhythm is maybe bed about 1 or 1:30.
Wow.
I just go by natural rhythm. But there were other things that I would come upon where I would go, oh, and it would come back to me to see the rightness of the information, but how am I going to apply it? And will I apply it now that I've got this valuable information? I love my ring, and I consult, I download the information all the time. Told the people who make the ring, please put a finder in it.
Oh, right. I've found mine in gardening gloves and in the washer.
The last time was in a rag bag.
Right.
And, but I knew it was in the house because it connected.
Right. You can see it
So I
connecting
knew
with
I
the
didn't
app,
lose
right?
it someplace else. It was in my home. I just needed
It's like
to-
find my ring.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep.
But I love the ring, and the data is extremely useful. And I echo your desire to have processes and collect information that is more relevant to who we are.
Right. Your whole person, right? Yep.
With our illness. And because a lot of the data that is collected, you can see that it would be very interesting to a healthy person who is, on a big fitness program. But for those of us who are just trying to be functional through a day
Yep.
and get some restorative sleep, we have a different need.
Right.
But regardless of the shortcomings, I find this is a very precious instrument, and I value the data a great deal.
One of the things that I'm hopeful we can use the ring for, it is designed as a sleep ring, right? But one of the things that you turned me on to in the very beginning was this recovery index that it has. And I said, oh, recovery index. How could we potentially use that index, that algorithm, to get a handle on what's causing or inducing post-exertional malaise, PEM, which so far has really eluded, been elusive as far as, how to measure it. But because this comes with this readiness and this recovery index, we might be able to see patterns in sleep and heart rate variability that then combined with some of the other tags
Yeah.
that shows, that just again reveals, wow, these are the combination of factors that are causing post-exertional malaise, and this is what it looks like.
But then on top of that, as we all know, we have different genes for certain things, and for instance, sleep. It may not have anything to do with an ME/CFS diagnosis, but for instance, there's a gene that they've discovered in a family that seemingly only needed 3 or 4 hours of sleep every night, and they would function completely normally. And so they went and looked in the genomes of these people, and they indeed found a gene that apparently, or a variant of a gene that only about, I think, 1 to 2% of the population has. I think many more of us think we have it, and we don't get enough restful sleep. But let's say some of the patients have that, so their sleep needs are going to be very different from other people. So we can't just put our blinders on to, oh, what are the genetics of that we think we know of for ME/CFS, but let's broaden that out to sleep genetics and pharmacogenetics, where we look at how people respond to medications, because we're all unique. And the joke around in politics right now is that one side of the fence are all snowflakes, right? That they're very sensitive or whatever. But I like to think of it in terms of that we're all snowflakes. We're all unique. We all have our own profiles and our own information, and that's going to impact our lives in so many different ways. And so we need to just look at it broadly, that we're taking as much into account as we can, because we're whole people. We're not just people with a diagnosis.
Right.
Do we want to take one question from?
We actually have a few questions from Facebook followers. A couple of them are built around the Oura Ring. I'm considering purchasing the Oura Ring. The one I had saved on Amazon is a year old. Any suggestions of newer versions or where to purchase? And I know you did mention earlier to Google, but any specific recommendations?
Well, it's pretty important that it fits right? They have a sizer that you get before they actually deliver the ring. And so it needs to fit very snugly on the non-dominant hand. So I don't know if the Amazon purchase, for example, comes with the sizers or what the size of the ring is. So I would say that's the most important thing, is to make sure that it fits, because it has to fit snugly in order to get the right ratings. And so the best place to go would be the Oura Ring site, which is Oura.com.
Or auraring.com?
Ouraring.com.
Is it Ouraring.com?
I can't remember.
Yeah, just do a Google search on Oura Ring,
Double check that.
O-U-R-A, and you'll find the
Is it
site.
bulky?
No, I think the design is, you get so used to it that it doesn't bother me that much.
It's a little bit bulky, but it's formed, right? That makes sense. Sometimes I'll knock it into things, and I think most people find it more comfortable on this first finger because it allows a little bit more room. And sometimes putting it on an inside finger means you get pressure from both sides.
And especially if you wear another ring too, they kind of can bang against each other.
I actually switched back and forth between two fingers. I'm not sure if you're supposed to do that, but if I got annoyed with one place, I'd wear it on the other finger for a while, and it wouldn't bother me. And then something, and I'd say, oh, I'm going to wear it on this finger.
Yeah, you can switch it around if you want, and depending on your finger sizes, sometimes as women especially, I think we swell up sometimes, so I sometimes will move it to a smaller finger and kind of move it around, and it's fine. I mean, it's overall, I think, and it learns, as Suzanne was saying, it kind of learns about who you are and what you're doing, and then they adapt for that. So, but yeah.
I got mine really confused. I gave it to a friend and said, oh, you got to try this ring, and it just got really confused.
Oh, it's not you.
And I think you said that the next version is a thinner.
Yeah, it'll be made out of titanium, I believe, and it will be pretty much the same width all the way around. They're going to get rid of this, but I don't know. That's future. I'm not sure when that will be coming out. So,
What to watch for there? Is there any information on when Oura will get the ME/CFS algorithms included, or will you be able to get an update to the current version?
well, I think this grant that Suzanne was talking about is going to be critical. If the funding comes through, I think that's a huge validation for Oura that there's going to be some funding behind this. So I do believe that could be a big trigger for them to really focus on it. They're a very small company. They have a very small team, and so because of resource constraints, they're going to have to be very careful about what they go after. But I personally know that they're very interested in this field. They love the idea of the ring being used for disease research, so I think they'll be very supportive. So we just, we can cross our fingers, and I have a sort of a standing weekly meeting with the CEO of Oura, so we talk about it every, when we get on the phone. So,
I mean, the nice thing is too that the adjustments aren't that dramatic, right? The algorithm adjustments just need to be made, and some of the messaging would need to be modified for ME/CFS. And again, it's really a resource issue.
Yeah, because once they come up with those tweaks, then they can do that at the factory, and they can just have a ring that would be sold to an ME/CFS patient different from what is sold to, yeah. So that's our hope. That's what we're really hoping. And I think the more that the community shows support for that, the more likely it'll happen.
So our Facebook friends confirmed that it is ororing.com.
Oh, good. Yay, Facebook crowd.
And question on a couple on research-related stuff. An individual joined 23 others in a Crohn's study, and this person has since been diagnosed with ME/CFS. Can this person's genetic information on file be used for research in this case as well?
Yeah, so depending on where they got their genetic information, whether it's from 23andMe, we are going to be focusing on genetics going forward. And so 23andMe has an API similar to how Aura has an API where an individual can, if they have a 23andMe profile, they can link up that data to their We Are Curious account. So then it pulls the genetic information into our platform. And then we have some algorithms that will run against it, so we can start to look for the tags, like I mentioned before, that if somebody wants to know how they compare to another person with the condition, do we both have the same MTHFR mutations or some of the other genes that I think a lot of people are curious about, all of that information will then be available through our platform.
So the individuals have inquired how they get on the new studies list.
So for the NIH study, we will be recruiting new onset patients, and we will be working with the University of Utah Center for Clinical Translational Sciences to identify in the Greater Salt Lake area region for the rings specific study. Now, what we're doing with We Are Curious is going to be open to everyone.
The more the merrier.
And the more the merrier. And we will hopefully be, again, get the award, and we will be partnering with ME Action and all of the users of the ME Action platform, which are about 16,000 ME patients around the world. So in that sense, that piece, the tracking piece and generating these, what Linda mentioned earlier, the onboarding survey and the tags that are important for the ME community to be following will be generated, with this mass.
That's the
participation.
Mass participation.
Yeah, and that's the whole intent, is to really grow this in a big way so that we get participation online. So even if you don't live in Salt Lake City, we're very interested in building this online cohort of people who are, and the consistency of everyone wearing the same technology, I think, is really important. And then the tags that are designed through the protocols, anyone who's on our platform will be able to join the tracking studies. So there's no limit really to the number of people that could participate in that.
Right, and I mean, it's important that We Are Curious is free. That's a free platform. Anybody can join, anybody can create a profile, an account on We Are Curious, and anyone can participate in a trackathon. The devices right now, cost you some money. And the genetic tests obviously cost, but coming on to the platform is free. Tracking is free. It just depends on how much add-on.
Right. Yep.
And so a person can purchase one of these from anywhere in the world, for that matter.
Right.
Online.
We have followers in Australia right now online. So
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, the company is based out of Finland, right?
The ring company's in Finland, yeah, and we're based in California. Yeah.
So the last question online right now is an individual who said, I've seen doctors that say this illness is only a sleep apnea problem. And of course, they say, is that true? And I know the answer would be on that. But how do you counsel people to address, providers who are
Uninformed. Take them a copy of the Institute of Medicine report. There's a very
Lean in.
there's a very good section on sleep in the Institute of Medicine report, and there are many published studies in the field that show that studies that excluded people with sleep apnea, and many studies that, on all levels. So that's kind of old-fashioned thinking. There was a period of time when that attitude was prevalent, but there have been a series of changes in the research that put that to rest. That isn't to say that primary sleep disorders aren't common. They are. They're very common in our patient population, but they're not the same thing as the disease. And I think some of our patients develop primary sleep disorders because of their disease. That's my personal opinion, especially central sleep apnea, but also some other forms, and movement disorders, restless legs, and periodic limb movement are very commonly a part of this illness. So there's a really important place for sleep studies, for formal polysomnography, because if you have one of those disorders, you need to be treating it because it may be contributing additional pathology to the ME/CFS symptoms. But there's definitely a primary pathology affecting sleep that's not just obstructive sleep apnea.
Is a copy of the IOM report on our website?
I think so, but it's also online in many, many places. And what I tell patients to do, and this is what I do often if I'm discussing it in the office, is go to the large report. It's 300 and something pages, but go to the section that is relevant to your question and just print it out, because each section is really less than 10 pages in most cases. So if you want to go see the research and the conclusions about sleep in the field, and hand it to your sleep doctor, they will be able to relate to that. Before we end, I just want to put in a plug for New Onset. One of the biggest gaps in the field of research in ME/CFS is capturing investigations when a person with this illness first becomes ill, because it takes a long time to get to a specialist and sometimes many years even to get to a diagnosis. So one of the things that Bateman Horne Center is going to try to prioritize, regardless of whether we win these awards, is trying to see more patients who have early onset illness, maybe as early as possible, but less than 3 years since the beginning of their illness would be our priority, so that we can start to include those people in research and all the different connections that we have with scientists. So if you know of cases or you hear about it, please let us know.
Okay, do we have any last questions for the panel? All right, I guess that's it. Thank you so much. This is very, very insightful, very exciting, and promising. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
It was good.
Thank you. Thank you.